We begin today the Gemara, Daf Lamed Beis and Aleph. We begin a new Perek, the fourth Perek of Masechta Sanhedrin. Okay, so here this Mishnah begins with what we discussed in the beginning of the Masechta regarding Dini Mamanis, Dini Nefashis, that there's a difference in the Bezdin that judges a person regarding money matters or that's judging regarding matters of life and death. So Zok Heilige Mishnah, Echad Dini Mamanis, Ve'echad Dini Nefashis. Whether we're speaking about a bezdin that's judging money matters or a bezdin that's judging capital punishment, bezdin has to make a proper interrogation of the witnesses, and as we'll see later, the Mishnah will say that the drisha is certain details that you ask. Chakira is the 7 basic details about the facts of what the Edom are saying, like time and place and things that are similar. So these kinds of interrogations of the Edom are similar by Dinei Mamanis and Dinei Nefashis. Shenema, because the pasuk says, Mishpat Echad Yielechem. The same halacha of judging is both by Mamanis and Nefashis. Echad, the same kind of judgment. Now the Mishnah goes on to say, Ma bein Dinei Mamanis ledinei Nefashis. What are the halachas that there are differences between the way you judge a person regarding money matters and capital punishment? So even though we just brought a pasuk that clearly says mishpat echad, that it's the same judgment by both, but now all of a sudden the Mishnah is asking, what's the difference between them? So Taisva says that Rishayim say that the judgment has to be the same, but as we'll see, many of the differences the Mishnah is going to say here is based on the fact that by dinei nefashis, by capital punishment, you have to try to be malamet zchus as much as possible to try to find a person's innocence, and therefore there's certain things that we do only by dinei nefashis and not by dinei mamanis. And there's other details as well that we learn from Psukim that Dinei Mamanis is different from Dinei Nefashis. So what's the difference between them? So the first is what we already learned in the first Mishnah of the Masechta. Dinei Mamanis b'shleisha. Judging a person for money matters is a bezdin of 3. Dinei Nefashis, when you're judging a person, capital punishment, be'esrim b'shleisha. It's 23 in the bezdin. Another difference, Dinei Mamanis comes to money matters, Paischin, when the Bezdin opens up the discussion of the court case, so they begin, Bein l'schos, Bein l'chayva. They begin with either saying that he's innocent or saying that he's guilty. But Dinei Nefashis, by a matter of Nefashis, capital punishment, Paischin l'schos, Ve'ein Paischin l'chayva. They begin with his innocence and not with his guilt. Another difference, Dinei Mamanis, Matin al pi echad, so you give the verdict based on the majority opinion, and that majority opinion could be even if there's one in the majority more than the minority, whether for innocence or for guilt. V'dinei nefashis, but by capital punishment, matin al pi echad l'schos. If you want to go by the majority based on one, that's only if it's going to be for his innocence. But val pishnayim l'chayva. But in order to say that he's guilty, you're going to have in the majority 2 more than the minority. Another difference, Dinei Mamanis, when it comes to money matters, and there's already a verdict, Machzirin, the Bezdin can go back on this verdict, Bein l'schus, Bein l'chayva. Whether they find out new information, whether now they're going to go back to say that he's innocent or guilty, either way, they can go back. However, Dinei Nefashis, Machzirin l'schus. They can go back on the verdict if now they found out something that proves his innocence. But Vein Machzirin l'chayva. But once they paskin that he's innocent, they're not going to go back on that verdict if it's going to now make him guilty. Another difference, Dinei Mamanis, when it comes to money matters, Hakel Melamdin Schus V'chayva. Anybody and everybody that's there can speak up and say something about his innocence or his guilt. That means not only the Bezdin, but it means even the Talmidim that was sitting around, they can also speak up, whatever they want in either way. However, Dinei Nefashis, when it comes to Dinei Nefashis, Hakel Melamdin Schus, everybody can speak up and say something about his innocence, but Ve'ein Hakel Melamdin Chayva. Not everybody there can speak up and speak about his, to say something about his guilt. Another difference is, we'll see, it's interesting, because over here it speaks about Hakel, everybody's sitting around, as we'll see from the Gemara, in those times, the yeshiva, where all the students were learning Torah, and the Bezdin, where people came to a court to be judged for any disputes, were in the same place. The yeshiva was the place of the court. And that's how the Talmidim learned. It's a very amazing way. You see how they used to learn. They learned, and they learned from their Rosh Hashiva, which was also the Dayan, and they saw the Dinei Torah. And that's how they learned how to take the halachas and practically see how you apply them in a Din Torah. So all the Talmidim was sitting around, but they were sitting around and watching the Din Torah. Another distinction is Dinei Mamanis, Hamalamet Chayva Malamet Schus. The one in the court case, when you have a judge that is saying something that he sees guilt, so he can then also speak up and say, no, I actually see another reason why he's innocent. And a judge that originally began saying something about his innocence, he can then change and say that I see another reason to say why he's guilty. However, by dinin nefashis, if a judge in the court case, in the discussion of the court case, brings up an idea why he sees that he's guilty, he can change and then say, no, I see something about him that he's innocent. But a judge that in the discussions, in the deliberations, brought up something that he's innocent, so he can't now change and go back to say that he's guilty. So Rashi explains what this refers to is in the deliberations. When there's a judge that said that he's innocent, so he has to stick to that line of thinking that he's innocent and try to prove that innocence that the person has. He can't change and try to prove his guilt. However, when it comes to the final verdict, if after the entire deliberation he sees that the conclusion that this person is guilty is true, he doesn't have to stick to his original opinion that he thought that he's innocent. He goes by the final ruling that he's guilty, and he can join the ones that say that he's guilty. However, the point over here is, since he had an idea that this person is innocent, we want to push this person to the furthest extent, this judge that is, to the furthest extent, to try to examine that svara of innocence, and therefore, if he brings up an idea of innocence, he has to try to stick to that and examine that possibility of innocence as much as possible, as long as they're in the deliberations. Another difference, dine mamanis, when it comes to money matters, danim bayayim v'goimrim balayla. They judge this person in the day, and then they can make the verdict at night. Dine nefashis, danim bayayim, by dine nefashis, they judge him by day, and v'goimrim bayayim, and the verdict has to be daytime as well. The Gemara is going to learn out from a pasuk. Another thing, dine mamanis, goimrim bayayim. When it comes to money matters, the Bezdin judges this person, and the verdict is on the same day. Whether it's for innocence or guilt. Dinin nefashis goimrim by bayayim l'zchos. But by dinin nefashis, if they have a verdict for innocence, then it could be even on the same day. But bayayim shalacharav l'chayva. But if they're going to say he's guilty, they have to sleep overnight. They have to wait to see, maybe by the next day they will think it over and see something that's innocent about him. So therefore, they have to wait till the next day. Now, lefichach, based on this last point here, ein danin loy b'erev Shabbos v'loy b'erev Yom Tif. When it comes to dinin nefashis, you can't have the court case on an erev Shabbos or on an erev Yom Tif. Why? Because they're not going to be able to paskin on that day. They're going to have to wait till the next day for the verdict. But then on the next day, it's already Shabbos and Yom Tif. You can't give the punishment of dinin nefashis on Shabbos itself. And then there's what's called inui hadin. Once you paskin, you're not allowed to leave the din, linger without actually fulfilling it. So therefore, you have to do it on a day that you'll be able to do the actual psak din on the next day. Another halacha, dine momenis, the halachas of money matters, hatmeis, va'ataris, or bezin that's sitting to discuss a matter of a subject of what's tamei, what's toy, maschilim in agadol. You begin, the one that's the greatest amongst the bezin, he says his opinion first. However, dine nefashis, when it comes to a matter of life and death, maschilim in atzad. You start from the side, meaning you start by someone that's the smallest amongst the people sitting in the court case. And the reason for this is, so Rashi here brings the pasuk, it says, Loisana al riv, and we read it Loisana al rav, which means that when you have the greatest in the court that says that this person is guilty, so once he says that, so then nobody else could argue with him. So therefore, you don't want that the first, the one that the greatest should open, then you won't be able to bring up other ideas of innocence. That's the simple pshat of what Rashi is saying. Mefarshim actually say, Dinamuki Yosef, Marsha, and others say that it doesn't mean in the literal sense that you can't argue on him after he says that he's guilty. Everybody has to say their opinion according to what they see is right, even if it's against the greatest in the court. But what it means to say is that when you have the Rav, the greatest, that says that he's guilty, others are going to be embarrassed, others are going to feel intimidated to say against him. So therefore we don't want him to speak up first. Another halacha, hakel kisherim lodon dine mamanis. Everybody, any yid is kosher to be part of a bezdin for money matters. But ve'ena kol kisherim lodon dine nefashis. Not everybody can be in a bezdin of dine nefashis. Ela kohenim leviim v'Yisraelim hamasiyin lekahona. You have to be from the kohenim leviim Yisraelim and someone that's kosher to marry a kohen, which excludes it. Rashi mentioned before, Gedim and Mamzedim, they cannot be on a bezdin of the dine nefashis. So So the Gemara begins with the first halacha of the Mishnah, that both by Din Nefashis and Din Mamanis, there's the halacha of Dirisha Chkira, that we interrogate the Eidim. Din Mamanis, afrek the Gemara, when it comes to money matters, mi be'inan Dirisha v'Chakira. Do we have to interrogate the Eidim? I'll ask you from what it says in the Braise, Shtar, when you have a document of a loan, Shezmane Kosov be'echad b'nisim b'shmita. It says that the money was borrowed on a Shchodesh Nisim and it's in a Shmita year. Okay, so we'll see soon in the Gemara the significance of this detail of the date that it's specifically in Shmita, but Rashi here clarifies how you borrowing money in Shmita. In Shmita absolves all loans. So Rashi says, not necessarily. It's possible that Shmita does not absolve the loans if you have a pruzbul, or actually if you borrow with a mashkin, so then it doesn't absolve the loan. But furthermore, Rashi says, and this is what the Gemara is going to point out later, when does Shmita absolve a loan? By the end of Shmita. So if you're borrowing money in middle of Shmita, but then you pay it before Shmita is up, so then it doesn't absolve the loan. So here, this is a loan that's written with a date in Shmita year. Now, Eidim come along and say, V'amru, hey chatamidim al shtar zeh. How are you testifying about this shtar, that the money was borrowed in this date? V'alei b'yoyim ploini. On that day, imanu v'yisam v'makam ploini. You were with us in a different location. This is the concept of Eidim Zaymimin. They prove that they're saying false testimony when they signed this shtar. Says the Braise, shtar kosher, ve'edav ksherim. The shtar is still kosher, and the Eidim are also still kosher. We don't suspect them of lying. Why is this? Chashinan, because what we say is, the term chashinan here doesn't just mean that we're concerned maybe. Chashinan means we accept to say that Shema ichru v'kasvu, that what happened over here is the loan happened on an earlier date. But they didn't write the shtar on the date of the loan. They delayed the writing of the shtar at a later time, and on that later time they wrote the shtar, and they wrote the location in the shtar, they wrote the location where the money was borrowed, not the location where they were at the time when they wrote the shtar. So therefore, these people are saying, it's true that they were talking a different location, because they wrote the location of where the money was borrowed. So therefore, the shtar is kosher, and the Eidim are still kosher. Ashi actually points out that the Gemara in Gittin, we learned also in Bava Basra, it says that when you write a shtar and you write it on a later date, and there's the place where the money was borrowed, you should write the location where you are writing the shtar now, so that it shouldn't come up such a problem that it'll look like it's a false shtar. But that's only l'chatchila. B'di'eved, if you write the location where the money was originally borrowed, not where you are now, the shtar is still kosher. So therefore, the shtar here is still going to be a kosher shtar. Now, says the Gemara, if this is the halacha, like it says in this Braise, so then you can't have the concept of chakiris, that you're going to interrogate the Eidim regarding the location. Because even if the location is not according to what it says in the shtar, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be kosher. So if you're going to say that you have to interrogate the Eidim regarding the time and the place, so how are you saying that we accept to say that it was written delayed, and when they wrote it, they were in a different location than when the money was borrowed? So then there's no point in interrogating the Eidim regarding the time and place of where the loan was, because anyways, you say that it's kosher because they wrote it later in a different location. So now the Gemara says, according to your reasoning, why are you asking only from a Braisa? Why wouldn't you ask from a clear Mishnah that should be a stira to what it says in our Mishnah? It's a stronger question if you ask from a Mishnah than a Braisa. What does the Mishnah say? If you have a shtar chayiv, a shtar of a loan that is predated, it's going to be puzzle. Why is it puzzle? Because every time you write a shtar on a loan, it gives you the ability to collect from the chasam mishubadim. It gives you the ability to not go to the lender, and if he doesn't have properties, you can go to any of the buyers of the lender and confiscate those properties that the buyers bought from him. But only from the properties that the buyers bought after the time of the loan, not before. Before that they bought already before. So when you make it predated, so now you're giving the person, the lender, the right to go. I said before, you're going to the lender, you're going to the borrower to collect the money. Sorry, you're going to the borrower, obviously, to collect the money. But here the point is that you're giving now the lender a right to collect even from buyers that bought before the loan. So therefore, shari chayv hamukdamin are going to be puzzle. However, if you delay the date of the loan, then ksherim, then it's kosher. Because adarab, in this case, the lender is being meichel the borrower. He's allowing him to write a later date. It gives him the option to sell properties and he won't be able to confiscate from those properties from the time of the loan itself, only from the later date in the shtar. So he's basically being meichel that ability, that right. So he's the shtar is kosher. That's the halacha of a mishnah. Now the question though is, how could you say that if a shtar was written and it has a later date, it's still going to be kosher? If you're going to say that you need a drisha v'chakire, if the shtar has a later date, why is the shtar kosher? If you're saying that the shtar that has a later date is kosher, so then you can't do any drisha v'chakire b'negei to the edim and to know if he was there in that time or in that place. The date in the shtar could be a later date of the time that the loan actually happened. Yeah, so Rashi over here points out when it says mu'charim kshedim means that there's other edim that came and told us that this loan happened, but it didn't happen on this date. The date in the shtar is later than the date that the loan happened. So we anyways have edim here that are telling us that this loan happened, but the Gemara is still asking because as explained here, there's a big difference between a milva al peh and a milva b'shtar. The fact that you have other edim that are here saying that we know that this loan happened, but it happened earlier than the date of the shtar, but it's not going to be necessarily a kosher shtar. The point over here is that this Mishnah is saying that it's going to be a kosher shtar, and we rely on the edim that signed the shtar. But the question is, if so, you can't interrogate them about the time and place that they wrote the shtar, because anyways, if they write a later date, it's kosher. So this Mishnah here is a contradiction. So the Gemara spells it out. If you can see that you say that you have to interrogate these edim that signed the shtar regarding the time and place of the signature of the shtar, so how could you say that if it has even a later date that it's still going to be kosher? Okay, so the Gemara explains. So here, what was the question of the Gemara? The Gemara was saying, why are we asking a question from the Braisa that we quoted before? You could ask from a Mishnah. It's a much stronger question. So this detail, the Gemara says, Ha loy kashya. Why the question was asked from the Braisa and not from this Mishnah here, that's not a question. Because the adifim minei kamrinan. Because we want to bring you the Braisa, which is showing how extreme this idea is. That even in the case of the Braisa, which is the Afila Echad B'Nisan B'Shmita, even if you see a shtar that has such a kind of a date that it was written on a Shchaydish Nisan in a Shmita year, it's not a time that people usually borrow money, because you know that the end of Shmita is coming very soon, and this loan is going to be absolved. So it's not usually a time that people borrow money. So the Lekela Meimar, it's much harder to say that Shemei Chru v'Kasvu, that he borrowed the money before, but he waited and he specifically went and wrote a date of Shemitah. Because the Leimar al-Ishtari, why would a person want to put such a kind of date which looks problematic? Because people don't usually borrow money in Shemitah year. So in such a case, when you see a later date, it seems like that it must be that he borrowed the money at this time. If not, he wouldn't have wrote this date, he borrowed the money before and wrote this date later. Why would he go and weaken the koyach of the shtar by writing a date that people will suspect is not true? Nevertheless, what do we say? That because when it comes to Shemitah, when does Shemitah absolve the loan? Not at the beginning of Shemitah, not in the middle of Shemitah, it's at the end of Shemitah. So therefore, when you write this later date, it's not absolving the loan. And therefore, it's still possible to say that even though it has this date, the loan did not take place now, the loan took place before, and it's just a later date that was written later. And therefore, if Eidim Zaymimin, if the Eidim come and want to make them Eidim Zaymimin, they're not going to be Eidim Zaymimin, because we can just say that it was written on a later date. Okay, so what's the Gemara saying here? The reason why we asked from this Braisa is because the Gemara wanted to point out how extreme this idea is that they're not going to become Eidim Zaymimin. Even in a situation when this date that we see on the shtar, it's not logical to say that it was delayed, that it was post-dated, but we still say that, and we'll still make it a kosher shtar. So that shows you how far this goes, and therefore, how could our Mishnah here say that this drishas v'chakiris, that we have to know the exact time and place? Okay, but really it's the same steer also to the Mishnah that it brought. Okay, so Makal Mokim, the Gemara concludes, but Makal Mokim Kashya, the question that we asked is a question from the Mishnah and the Braisa we quoted. It's clear that there's no Drisha v'Chakire by Dinim Mominus, and in our Mishnah it says that even by money matters there is Drisha v'Chakire. Okay, so the Gemara is going to give 4 different answers. Simin, Ches, Reish, Cherpish, for the different answers that the Gemara gives to this. So Rab Chanina said, Tevar Teire, that minat Torah, the halacha is like it says in our Mishnah. Echad dinei mamanis, vechad dinei nefashis. B'drisha b'chakira. By both, there has to be a proper interrogation. Shenema mishpad echad yilachem, as the Mishnah quotes the pasuk, that has to be the same justice, the same judgment. Now, however, when it says in the Mishnah and the Brisa that the Gemara quoted that there's no Dirisha v'chakira, that's Midrabanan. Why did Chachamim come and say that you don't have to interrogate Eidim? In order that the door should not be locked in front of people that want to borrow money. If a person knows that when you lend someone money and then there's going to be a problem, he's going to have to bring witnesses and it's going to be an interrogation, it's going to be a whole to-do, a whole difficult matter, why should I get involved in this? Why should I lend someone money? So Chachamim, with the koyach of Hefke, Bezn, Hefke, made a takana that you don't interrogate Eidim. Ella, huh? Again?
It's a table for him.
For the malva, and it's also for the leiva, correct? So people should want to lend him money. So that's the brisa. So the Gemara's answer is the Mishnah is speaking about the din min ha-Torah, and the brisa and the Mishnah that the Gemara quotes is speaking about the din min Rabbanan. What the Gemara asks on this, if that's the case, that Bezdin is not given the chance to interrogate the Eidim, so Elamayata told, what happens if Bezdin, in money matters, made a mistake? The verdict was wrong. Lo yishalmu. Bezdin should not have to reimburse the one that they made a mistake with him. Why? Because Bezdin could say, he didn't allow us to interrogate the Eidim properly, so this mistake happened. It's not our fault. Bezdin only has to reimburse if it's their negligence. But if we're taking away their ability to see the full picture, to listen to the Eidim, to interrogate them, so it's not their fault. Says the Gemara, no, here as well, Chachamim made a takana that Bezdin does have to reimburse, because Kol Sheken Shetil and Dallas B'fnei Loivin. If you're going to say that Bezdin, when they made a mistake regarding money matters, they don't have to reimburse, definitely nobody's going to want to lend anybody money. Because you're going to say to yourself, if this ends up in a court case and Bezdin will make a mistake against me, I'll never be reimbursed. Why should I lend anyone money? So this as well, Chachamim said that you're going to have to reimburse in the case of a money matters where the Bezdin made a mistake. Another pshat the Gemara says, Rava Amar. Rava says, Masnisin Dahacha, that both the Mishnah here and the Brisa, or the Mishnah that the Gemara brought, are both the Takana Midrabanan. So why does it say in our Mishnah that you interrogate Eidim? Masnisin Dahacha b'dinei knossos. Our Mishnah is speaking about a money matter, which are penalties. Not in a case of a loan where Chachamim instituted that you should not lock the door in front of one that wants to borrow money. It's talking about penalties that a person has to pay. So there, you leave it on the din Torah that the Eidim have to be interrogated. The Idach and the Mishnah and the Brisa that the Gemara quoted Bahidah is Valvois regarding a loan or regarding a person that's maida to a loan. There Chachamim instituted that there's no interrogations. Rav Papa Amar, a third pshat, Rav Papa says Idi v'Idi Bahidah is Valvois. Both the Mishnah and then the Brisa and the Mishnah and the Gemara is talking about a case of loans or a person admitting to a loan. So why does it say in our Mishnah that we interrogate the Eidim? Kan b'din merume. The Mishnah is speaking about a case where the Bezdin sees that there's something fraudulent about this din Torah here. They see that this person, this lender is a fraudster. From the way he's speaking to things, he's saying. So in such a case, Bezdin will have to interrogate the Eidim. Kan b'din she'ein merume. But in the Brisa and the Gemara, it's speaking about a situation where it's a regular din Torah. You see a malva and a loive, and Bezdin doesn't suspect anything that's a fraud here. So in such a case, Bezdin does not have to interrogate the Eidim. And the kid says, the Gemara kid Reish Lakish, this is like what Reish Lakish said. The Reish Lakish asked that there's two psukim. Ksiv, in one pasuk it says, B'tzedek tishbet amisecha. You should judge your friend with justice. So it says the term tzedek once. In another pasuk, the Torah says tzedek tirdaif. It says twice the term tzedek. What's the difference? Hakeitzat kan b'din merume. If it's in a case where it's a din merume, so over here, Bezdin has to go the extra mile. They have to really interrogate this matter properly, tzedek, to make sure that there's going to be justice, that justice will be served over here. And kan b'din she'ein merume. When it says once tzedek, that's because it's easier for Bezdin to serve justice. They don't have to interrogate the matter so deeply. Right, so the Mefarshim here say, when Reish Lakish here says the pshat in the pasuk, he doesn't actually mean that the pshat that we said in the Mishnah is also in the pasuk, because minat Torah you always have to interrogate. There is really no difference, so you can't really touch that into the pasuk itself. It's just that Reish Lakish is making the point that when it comes to a case where the Bezdin sees that there's something fraudulent in this din Torah, Bezdin has to interrogate deeper. Bezdin has to look deeper into the subject. So based on that, we also say b'negeya to the Takanas Chachamim that by dinim mamanis we don't do any interrogations. That's only if Bezdin doesn't see fraud here. But if Bezdin sees a din merume, then that Takanas Chachamim does not apply. You are going to have to make a drisha v'chakira in the Eidim. Okay, these are the three pshatim in the Mishnah. Oh, so this taka I said before 4. There's really only 3 pshatim in the Mishnah. Now there's a 4th statement here from Rav Ashi, which is not another pshat in the Mishnah. He says, he goes back to the psukim that we just mentioned here. Rav Ashi says, Masnisin Kiddushanin. The answer for our Mishnah, why it's not a contradiction to the other Mishnah or the other Braise, is like we already answered, 3 answers. Now, Kroi, the psukim that we brought up over here, then in one pasuk it says once tzedek, and another pasuk it says twice tzedek. Reason it says twice tzedek, echad ledin ve'echad l'pshara, because it's saying sometimes Bezdin has to serve justice by the rule of law, and other times it's a compromise. That itself is the justice. And the Gemara brings an example for this. Keitzad shtei sfinos ovris benar. If you have 2 people that are traveling and they're traveling in a narrow river, and they're coming from opposite directions and they meet one another. In if they're both going to pass at the same time, they're going to crash and they're going to both drown. If they pass one after the other, then they'll be able to pass through. So one has to go to the side first and allow the other to pass. Or 2 camels that are going up on the slope of a mountain in Beis Chayrain, which is a narrow pathway. 2 people coming from opposite directions meet one another. If they're going to both go at the same time, they're going to both fall off of the mountain. If they go one after the other, they'll both be able to go up. So what do? Who gets to go first, and who has to wait? And if someone waits, it could be a loss for him. He's not going to be on time, whatever it is. So who has to give the other one the right to go? So if there's one of them has a load and the other one does not have a load, the one that has a load with him is going to go first. One that's close to a city where he's heading to, and the other one is still very far. So the one that's far is the one that gets the first ability to go. Okay, so that's in a case where it's very clear. You can paskin, or you can say clearly based on the situation who should have the right of way. However, what's if they both are from a city which is the same close or the same far, or they both have a load? There's no difference between them. Then what do? Who's going to go first? Hatal pshara b'neim. This is a case where you're going to have to make a compromise, and you decide who's going to go first and who's going to wait, and then umaylis schar zuluzu. The one that got to go first has to reimburse the one that had to stay behind and wait, and reimburse him something for whatever loss he had by the fact that he had to wait for this. So this is a situation where you have a pshara, where because they're both the same, so you're going to have to figure out and make a compromise between them. So that's the pasuk there. Tzedek. Sometimes there's the verdict where it's the ikar adin, and sometimes there's a pshara. Tana Rabbanan, and another brayse we learned about this pasuk tzedek tir daif. When it says in this pasuk tzedek, it's not only referring to the bezdin themselves, that they have to seek out justice. It's referring to the balei dinim, that they have to find a proper bezdin. Tir daif halech, that is acha bezdin yofe. You should go after a good bezdin, a proper bezdin. Go, even if it means traveling far, go and find a good bezdin to paskin a right din for you. So, and here the Gemara brings examples, the Braisa brings examples. Achar Rabbi Eliezer, you should go travel to Rabbi Eliezer Lulud, in the city of Lud. Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai LeBroir Chayil, go to the place called Broir Chayil. And here the Gemara stops and explains what's this place of Broir Chayil. It has an interesting name. Tane, so in the Braisa we learned about this, that Kail Rechaim Beborni, if this is the name of the place, Borni. If in this place Borni there was a sound of a mill that's crushing, then what was this? That means Shavua Ben, Shavua Ben. It was like an announcement. It was a sign for the people that there's going to be a Shavua Ben. What's Shavua Ben? A bris. And it's called Shavua Ben because after 7 days, on the 8th day, you make the bris. So Rashi explains that because in this place there was a decree that they're not allowed to make a bris for a child, so they couldn't announce clearly to invite people to the bris. So therefore, they would just crush, because for a bris you have to have herbs that are needed for the healing of the baby. So they would make the sound with the meal so that people would know that that's an announcement for a bris. That's by a bris. And also then, where am I here? Oiraner, when they lit a lot of candles, in this place called Brei Chayil. That means Mishtasham, Mishtasham. That was a sign that there's going to be a chasana, a festive meal, which refers to a chasana. So also over here, they could not say this and announce this clearly, so therefore they made this kind of sign that people should know that there's a chasana taking place. So that's why it got this name, this interesting name that it said Brei Chayil. Okay, so this, yeah.
Those things are connected to the name?
Brei Chayil, does it
there's
express?
an actual place in Israel.
1 second. Does it express the name itself? Not sure. Maybe not. Okay, Akapanim. This is what this place was unique about. That okay. Taner Rabbanon in a Braise it says, Tzedek Tirdoif. So, like we said before, that a person that it refers to the Baalei Dinim that they should go after someone that is a good bezdin. Halecha Chacham Yeshiva. You should go after the Chachamim where they are in their yeshiva. As I mentioned before, in the yeshiva where all the Talmidim came to learn Torah, that's where the Bezdin was. That's where they judge people. Acharab Eliezer leLod, Acharab Yechon Mezaka leBrei Chayil, Acharab Yeshua lePekiyin, Acharab Gamliel leYavne, Acharab Akiva leBnei Barak, Acharab Masya leRoimi, Acharab Chananya ben Tradion leSichni, Acharab Yesi leTzipairi, Acharab Yehuda ben Beseira leNetziven, Acharab Yeshua leGoila, and Goila here means exile. Rashi says it refers to Pumpadisa in Bavel. That's where his Bezdin was. Pumpadisa was the main place where the Bezdin was, in the main area of Galus and Bavel. Acharebi leBei Sha'arim, Achachachamim. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, you follow the greatest Bezdin of the Chachamim, where? The Lishkas Agazis, in the Lishkas Agazis, which is in the Beis Hamikdash. Going back to the Mishnah said, Dinei Mammon is Paischin, when it comes to money matters. So there, you could open the Din Torah, whether the innocence or the guilt of the Baalei Dinim. But when it comes to a Dinei Nefashis, you have to open with Zechus, with the innocence of the person. Says the Gemara, Heichi Amrinan, how? What is it that you begin with the Zechus? So the Gemara is going to bring many different opinions about this. Amar Rav Yehuda, so Rav Yehuda says, Hachi Amrinan Lahu. This is what we say to the Eidim. Mi Yemek the Kamrisu. Who says that your Eidos is right? So Rashi says, after the Eidim say their testimony, and now Bezdin has to, and Bezdin already interrogated them, that's what Rashi says, and now Bezdin has to start deliberating this matter. So the Bezdin, the first thing they open up with is, they turn to the Eidim and they say to them, that who says what you're saying is true? Maybe it's all a lie and you're just coming to accuse this person and you want him to be killed. That's how they open up. So Allah says, but if so, we're muzzling them, we're intimidating them, we're accusing them that they're saying a lie. So why would we do that? So the Gemara says, well, why not? That's the whole point. We're trying to close their mouth in order that they should not cause this person to be chayiv misa. Did we learn in a Braisa? Rav Shimon ben Elazar says, that when the Eidim say their testimony, we bring them from one place to another in order to psychologically put them under pressure. So they should start being confused. They shouldn't have a clear mind. And they should say to themselves, forget it. We're not giving this testimony. So we see that we don't want them to say the Eidos. So maybe over here as well, we intimidate them and we accuse them of lying in order for them to not want to speak. Says the Gemara, but midami, you can't compare. Over there, when you're just causing them psychological pressure, so then they themselves will just walk away. Over here, to go and directly accuse them and intimidate them, how can we do that for Edom? So therefore, the Gemara says that can't be. That's not the pshat. Now, Taisus here points out, as I mentioned, according to Rashi, this intimidation is after the Edom already said their Eidos, and they were already interrogated. So Taisva says, so in what way are we muzzling these Eidim? They already said their Eidos. So now it's too late. They can't take back their Eidos anyways. By Eidos there's a halacha, kivin shehigid, shuvin echayzer magid. Eidim can't say Eidos and then retract from what they said before. So Taisva says, in one pshat, Taisva says that it must be that the case over here is that they said their Eidos, but they were not interrogated yet. And therefore, before they were interrogated properly, they could take back their Eidos. And that's what the Gemara is asking, you're muzzling them. So Allah says another pshat. This is what we say when we open up l'schos. We turn to the Baal Din, to the person that's being accused, and we say to him, Yesh l'cha edim lazimam. Do you maybe have witnesses that will be mazim, that will prove that the first witnesses are edim zaymim, and therefore the punishment that they're trying to give you, that you should die, it's really on them, that they should be chayiv misa. So that's how we open l'schos for this person. So Amalei Rabbi said to Allah, are we going to open this way with a schus for this Baldin? but then that's a chayva for the Eidim, because if they're Eidim Zaymimin, then they're going to be chayiv misa. The whole point is we're trying to prevent a chayiv misa on a Yid. Vitzilo Eida, v'shavtu vitzilo Eida, but by paischin in this way, so then you're opening up the possibility that the Eidim Zaymimin will be found false and they'll be chayiv misa. So the Gemara says, why? Who said? When they're offering and telling him that maybe you can bring Eidim to make them Eidim Zaymimin, would that be a chayva that these Eidim now will be chayiv misa? We learned in the Mishnah about Eidim Zaymimin. Eidim Zaymimin Ragin, the Eidim Zaymimin that are found to be false witnesses, we don't give them the punishment of Kasha Zaman, that now they get killed, like what they wanted to do, Achi Yigomer Adin, unless there's first the Gemara Din. It had to be a verdict. And after the verdict, before they gave the Misa to this Baldin, then they were found to be Eidim Zaymin. That's when there's the din of Kasha Zaman, that now the Eidim are going to be Chayiv Misa. But over here, Bezdin is saying to the Baldin, maybe you could find Eidim Zaymin to prove that they're false even before the verdict. Then they would not be Chayiv Misa. So therefore, this is not a Chayiv for the Eidim. No, so the Gemara says, but still, the question of Rabbe is still a question. This is what I was saying. When this person hears what the Bezdin is telling him, so if this Baldin is going to be quiet, if he wants to get back now at these Eidim that testified against him, he'll just be quiet until after the verdict, and then then he'll bring Eidim that will prove that these Eidim are liars, and then so you're saying something that creates a possibility. You're planting in his mind this idea that maybe I should be quiet and then be mazim the first Eidim. So that's the question that Rabbi was asking. Even this we should not do. Just like you don't want to cause this Yid to die, you shouldn't plant an idea in his mind that he'll be quiet and cause these Eidim to end up dying. So therefore, Rabbi says, how do we open l'schos and the dentaira of dinei nefashis? What we say to him is, Yesh l'cha Eidim la'akchisham. Could you find other witnesses that are going to contradict them? Hakchosha is different than Hazama. Hazama is when the second group of Eidim say, Imanu ayisem b'makom pleini. We're not contradicting the actual story that you're saying, what this person did, but you weren't there. You were in a different time with us, in a different place with us at this time. So then there's the Hazama, the first Eidim are completely false. Hakchosha is when they're contradicting the actual facts of the story itself. The second group comes and says, you say that he killed someone. We know that he did not kill him. Someone else did. It wasn't him. So hakosha, it ends up being a trey. It becomes a stalemate, and you can't do anything. So that's what we tell the Baldin. Another option, the Gemara says, how do we open l'schos? Rav Kahana? Rav Kahana says that after the Eidim say their Eidos, the Bezdin then opens the deliberations with the following statement. They say, Medivreichem nizdake ploni. From what we hear from the Eidim, we could see that this person is innocent. Now, then they go on to discuss that he could be innocent and that could be not. But the first thing is they open up saying that he's innocent. Abai and Rava both said, Amrinan lei, we say to the Baldin, Iloi kotlis, if you're not guilty, if you did not kill, loi tiltchal. Do not be afraid. They strengthen him that he should not be afraid if he did not kill. That's how they open l'schos. Ravashi says, Kol mi she'idei l'schos yavav yilam adalav. What they open and they say, anybody that knows anything about this person's innocence, let him come and tell it to us. Says the Gemara Taink v'said Abai v'Rava, and Abrayis we learned like Abai and Rava said. Rebbe says by a saita, the pasuk says, when she's going to drink those waters of the saita, so they begin to say about her the innocence. That's what the pasuk says. But then the pasuk says the curse, that if she was mizana, what's going to happen to her? That she's going to die. So from the fact that the pasuk opens first with her innocence, from here we learn that by adin nefashis you have to open first with the merit, with the innocence, and you see like this point that you strengthen the Baldin, like by the Ishod, you tell him that if you're innocent, be strong because nothing's going to happen to you.
Interesting.